This podcast is brought to you by Audible. You can now get 2 free audiobook downloads and a 30-day free trial at audible.bogosity.tv. Your choice from the world's largest selection of over 180,000 digital audiobooks and spoken word content for your iOS or Android device, Kindle, or MP3 player. Go to audible.bogosity.tv now. Welcome to the Bogosity podcast for the week of February 5th, 2017, the podcast that covers frosting with cake. This is your host, Shane Killian, and joining me for the first time, someone you've seen in the comments for years, Blake Pettis. Blake, welcome to the podcast.
Welcome to you too.
Well, want to tell us a little something about yourself?
In high school, I like to play sports. I love 70s and 80s rock. And I like to play the trombone.
Cool. So I want to start off by issuing a little correction about something we talked about last week. There still doesn't seem to be any real good information about that shooting in front of the Milo talk, but there is a lot of video, and based on that and the fact that the police released the shooter after questioning, it seems like the shooter was a Milo and Trump fan acting in self-defense against protesters who were attacking him, so I just wanted to make that much clear at least. Now, before we get into the stories, I want to let you know about a new affiliation I think you're going to like. If you go to bogosity.tv/TuttleTwins, you'll be taken to a website where you can get some great books for elementary school-age children. Whether you're homeschooling or just want to supplement your child's education and counteract the socialist indoctrination that most of them get, you'll love the Tuttle Twins books. Books about liberty and free market economics that include children's versions of Bastiat's The Law, Leonard Read's I, Pencil, and Hayek's The Road to Serfdom, as well as books about the Federal Reserve and how regulations protect business cronies. As you can see from the sample pages on the website, they're all easy to read and nicely illustrated, so check out bogosity.tv/TuttleTwins.
Yeah, I've heard about those on some of the Tom Woods podcast episodes.
Yeah, they look really good. Okay, let's delaminate the news of the bogus. Big news this week is Trump's ban on refugees and immigrants from Muslim-majority countries that's getting a lot of attention. More accurately, he suspended for 120 days the entry for refugees, migrants, and foreign nationals beginning on January 27 from countries that the Obama administration imposed extra visa restrictions on, even though none of them have killed Americans on American soil, but ones from countries outside the ban, such as Egypt and Saudi Arabia have. But anyway, there's currently a stay on it from the courts. Well, one source of criticism is none other than the Charles Koch Foundation, who feel that the ban is not consistent with a free and open society.
Yeah, and yet the left is always criticizing the Koch brothers as being right-wing politicians, even though they're not really right-wing that much at all.
Exactly, that's what I've found as well, but I keep seeing like the exact opposite of what they say, and they keep supporting groups like the ACLU and the United Negro College Fund, and it's just like completely opposite of how they're portrayed. Well, the Koch Foundation's president, Brian Hooks, chaired a conference of donors last weekend, and he said, quote, "We believe it is possible to keep Americans safe without excluding people who wish to come here to contribute and pursue a better life for their families. The travel ban is the wrong approach and will likely be counterproductive."
Yeah, these people haven't been put on trial or...
No. It's just coming from one of those countries.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about Egypt and Saudi Arabia. We are the biggest exporter of guns to that country, and Egypt, we just installed kind of our own proxy government.
Yeah. So he went on, quote, "Our country has benefited tremendously from a history of welcoming people from all cultures and backgrounds. This is a hallmark of free and open societies."
There are some people that say that, like, in a libertarian society, you wouldn't have freedom of movement because you'd be crossing property lines and you couldn't move onto another person's property without their permission. But it's different because it's a state border and it's not like an actual property line.
Right, but even in private property philosophy, you have right-of-way.
Yeah, how are you going to have, like, feasible transportation on the ground if you don't have any kind of right-of-way?
Right, so that's very important. Now, Koch himself didn't comment directly, but last summer he called the idea, quote, antithetical to our approach and, quote, reminiscent of Nazi Germany.
It's actually one of the few places where Trump being Hitler is kind of applicable, but not really.
Yeah.
It's just kind of stretching just because it's not so drastic or broad.
Yeah, but it's like, tell me again why I'm supposed to hate the Kochs, because I don't get it.
Yeah, and even this article, which is Washington Post, is trying so hard to kind of compliment them, but also they're saying words like conservative industrialist, which in the back of the readers of this Post mind is supposed to trigger like thoughts about child labor and stuff.
Say, if you're tired of the promos in this podcast, well, the patrons got it early and with no ads or promos. Just go to patreon.bogosity.tv and donate at any level.
Hey everybody, this is Dave of the Superplex Bros, and you're listening to the Bogosity Podcast. When you're done, why don't you head over to superplexbros.com. We have all kinds of editorials and reviews on video games and pro wrestling. We're also currently hosting a major project called the Superplex Pokemon League, and we're about to go into our 3rd season. We just had our actual draft, and we're going over all of the teams and their draft picks. So why don't you head on over there, check things out, and if you like, you can even check out the Superplex Brothers podcast, where Matt and I basically bullshit about video games, pro wrestling, or whatever the hell we want. Anyway, until next time, take care.
Uber just can't catch a break. First, economically illiterate lefties complain about price gouging with their surge pricing policy. Now they're experiencing a boycott because they turned off surge pricing for passengers at JFK Airport. So what happened was the New York City Taxi Union engaged in a 1-hour strike to protest the Muslim ban we just talked about, which is actually a bad term, by the way, because, I mean, even if you're a Christian or whatever coming from those countries, it's just travel from those countries that's shut off. But anyway, for an hour, they refused to pick up passengers from JFK Airport, and this meant that lots of people were turning to Uber instead, and Uber followed the policy they always do, which is to turn off surge pricing if there's an unexpected supply shock. And so generally surge pricing is there like if there's a time of need like New Year's Eve when a lot more people are out and about and needing rides. Drivers who are just staying home and not bothering when they're offering a lower payment, they have an extra incentive in the form of a higher payment to get out and give people rides.
Some of these people who would be trying to avoid the travel ban, they might not be able to pay for a high fare for a taxi cab. So, I mean, what Uber did was really good in that way.
Well, it's good and it's bad. It kind of depends on your point of view. But as Robert Graham of Errata Security points out, it really should be called demand pricing. And he says, quote, "Supply and demand is every much a law as gravity. If the supply of taxi drivers is less than the demand, then not everyone is going to get a ride. That's basic math. If there's only 20 drivers right now and 100 people wanting a ride, then 80 riders are going to be disappointed. The only solution is more drivers. Paying drivers more money gets more drivers." And so, I mean, at the airport, I mean, you still got all of the people from non-Muslim countries, just traveling around the country or from somewhere else who were still needing rides. And so, I mean, it's good that they didn't have to pay out the wazoo for an Uber car, but also it meant that there really weren't any more Uber drivers around than there are normally at that time, except all of a sudden, all the people who would normally take a taxi are also wanting Ubers, so.
Yeah, and I just think that taxi unions are too political and they get too much involved in politics, just like teachers unions, which I deal with more the teachers union side of things because I go to a public school.
So economically ignorant leftists who've been complaining about surge pricing since day one all of a sudden think it's bad to turn it off because they see it as breaking the strike. The hashtag #DeleteUber started trending as they urged people to delete the Uber app and not use the service anymore.
Yeah, I guess they realize that constantly low prices on some things are not always good.
Well, I think they were just upset that they were giving rides at all, or
instead of the taxis. Yeah, that makes sense.
But, I mean, they don't understand how Uber does things. When there's a normal spike like New Year's Eve, the surge pricing convinces drivers to stop partying and start giving rides. But when there's something unexpected, like, a blizzard and people are stranded and they need someone to come by in an SUV to take them home, Their policy is to turn that off so that people who can't afford the higher price aren't stranded. But the trade-off is it takes longer to service everyone needing a ride because you've got fewer drivers. A lot of them who probably could go out and give people rides are like, are you kidding? It's cold out there. But ultimately, the policy about turning off surge pricing is really just to avoid bad PR pretty much from those very same ignorant lefties. And if they'd allowed surge pricing to occur during the strike, the higher price would mean more drivers, but turning off surge pricing means that extra supply isn't there to cover the slack from the absent taxi drivers. So they're not providing any more rides from the airport than they would on a typical day.
Yeah, I just think that once you get opposition president in power, the other party will not be satisfied with anything.
Yeah, and the taxi companies and the taxi unions are very heavily politicized on the left, and so it probably stands to reason. Well, notorious fake news outlet CNN was one of the ones misreporting on it, saying things like, quote, Uber said that it was suspending surge pricing from JFK, effectively lowering the cost of a ride. No, they were keeping the cost the same, just not increasing the supply of drivers to cover the shortfall. And they also claimed that Uber only criticized the policy after the public outcry, which is untrue. They criticized it before the strike even happened. And CNN also made out like Uber was in bed with Trump, whereas Lyft was angelic and pure, but A, Lyft kept picking up riders at JFK during that time as well, and B, Lyft is owned by Peter Thiel, who's a Trump advisor.
That's a shock.
Fact-checking, how do you do it?
Not at CNN.
Yeah. But, their whole timeline is off. The strike was announced at 5 p.m. to take place between 6 and 7 p.m., Uber didn't turn off surge pricing until 7:30, half an hour after the strike was over. And they might not even have been aware of the strike, just making the choice they always do, and all of a sudden there's a sudden demand spike.
I honestly don't get why they're so angry. They're protesting a travel ban, but then Uber and Lyft are helping people travel places.
I don't know.
I don't get it.
I don't even see what the point was in striking against JFK Airport to begin with, because the whole idea is you strike after the people you're complaining about, so you inconvenience them. Well, who were they inconveniencing here that had anything to do with the travel ban?
I think it's just because New York is more left-leaning, and so they're more likely to do it than most other cities.
So Graham concludes, quote, the timing alone makes the hashtag delete Uber claims nonsense, as the strike was already over for 36 minutes when Uber tweeted. But in any case, Uber's decision not to do surge pricing did not entice customers with lower prices. They would still have long waits, as the tweet says, causing a strong disenticement. No rational person could interpret this as Uber trying to profit from this event. On the other hand, before this event, Uber announced its opposition to Trump's action and promised to help any of its drivers adversely affected.
This is why you should look more at internet news sites such as this and less ideologically driven podcasts such as this, and less at CNN, MSNBC, and Fox.
Yeah, but Robert Graham has got his own ideology, but he does have a good reputation as well. And like I've said before, the advantage with new media is that you can do things like put in links that people can follow and verify, and if those links aren't there, then you can kind of wonder why not. Things like that. If you're on the Wi-Fi in a coffee shop or hotel, anyone on that network can get your traffic. Do you really trust all of those strangers? For that matter, do you really trust your ISP? A VPN can protect you from prying eyes, disguise your location, and even foil government censors. It's essential in this day and age, so go to vpn.bogosity.tv and you'll be taken to BoxPN. Starting at just $2.99 a month, you can get unlimited high-speed connections to VPN servers all over the world, and they don't log connections, so your privacy is assured. Traveling abroad, just VPN home, and don't worry about what those other governments are doing. Back at home, stop your ISP from traffic shaping and messing with the quality internet access you're paying good money for. You can connect from multiple machines at once, including your smartphone or tablet, and it supports all the secure standards, including OpenVPN and SSTP. Bypass sensors and surveillance with your own secure VPN connection. Go to vpn.bogosity.tv. Okay, back to criticizing Trump. And the thing that will probably prove to be the worst thing about the Trump administration is how much like the Obama administration it is.
Yeah, and yet all the people that are criticizing him were probably people that voted for Obama.
Oh, sure. Well, we've mentioned before how Obama summarily executed 16-year-old American citizen Abdul Rahman al-Awlaki in a 2011 drone strike in Yemen, a country where we aren't even at war. Indeed, is an impoverished country that is no threat to us solely so the U.S. can support the terrorist nation Saudi Arabia. Well, now, Trump just killed his 8-year-old sister. This past Sunday, U.S. Navy SEAL Team 6 carried out a cowardly surprise attack, what we would call a terrorist attack if another country had done it to us, where the military claimed 14 al-Qaeda fighters were killed. But we know what that means. I mean, anyone killed by a drone is automatically considered to be a terrorist. Well, according to Yemen, 8 women and 7 children aged 3 to 13 were killed in the raid, including Master al-Awlaki's young sister. No known al-Qaeda leaders were killed.
I mean, what's a 3-year-old going to do to a U.S. soldier, much less a regular U.S. citizen? I mean,
well, don't you know they're terrorists in training?
Yeah, but what if on the off chance that you miss and then they remember that, or they get inspired by other people that saw those events and then they blow back and create more terrorism?
Oh, why do you hate America?
I don't hate our values. I hate when we distort our values.
Yeah, but I mean, that's what they always come back with.
Yeah, I get that a lot at school when I talk about stuff like this.
Now, one of the American commandos was killed in the raid as well. A statement from President Trump lamented his death, but not one word about the children. Fake news outlet CNN also covered the commando's death, but again, no mention of any civilian casualties. Hey, our high priests in the government say there weren't any, so there must not be any.
It's kind of lying by omission.
Yeah. Well, it turns out the 8-year-old girl who's pictured in this Intercept article, and it's really sad because she was just as adorable as she could be. She wasn't killed by a drone. She wasn't like collateral damage from a bomb or anything like that. She was shot in the neck.
And that means that the victim was definitely seen by whoever killed her.
Yep.
There's no way you can get by with saying I didn't know that it was a innocent little child.
Yep. The raid had been initially planned by Obama and his administration, but the timing meant that it was carried out by Trump. Trump personally authorized the attack, so please don't think we're absolving him of blame, but just understand, if you were one of the ones thinking that this stuff was just hey-ho and tickety-boo under Obama, you have no business suddenly chastising Trump for it. Unless you want to finally admit your Lord and Savior Saint Obama was as evil as he is.
I don't think that'll ever happen.
Yeah. I know, I'm looking for consistency again. When will I learn? Now, despite what you see in the movies, the Navy SEALs, and especially SEAL Team 6, have a long history of revenge ops, unjustified killings, mutilations, and other atrocities. And the rhetoric is that this is all needed to get al-Qaeda, but al-Qaeda wasn't even in Yemen before the Obama administration began bombing and droning it and killing civilians. And I mean, these are people that they wouldn't have given the time of day to before and would have even ridiculed or even vehemently opposed. But then when another country comes in and starts dropping bombs on your children and shooting them in the neck...
Desperate times call for desperate measures.
Yeah. Kind of makes you wonder how much longer it's going to be before people spot the pattern.
I think it's just because the wars are now lasting longer than the presidential terms, so people are kind of forgetting what happens in those 8 years where their president is not in power.
Yeah, but I mean, it's like, I forget how long the War of 1812 was, but...
I think it was 4 years.
Yeah, I think the Mexican-American War was 4 years. Civil War was 4 years. World War I was 4 years. We were only in it like 1 or 2. World War II was 7 years, I think, and we were in it for 4. So, I mean, this whole thing about being at war in a country for decades That's not historically what America was doing.
How long was the peace period between Iraq War I and Iraq War II?
Well, I don't know if I'd call it a peace period, but it was like 9 or 10 years, something like that. But, I mean, there were still bombings and sanctions and everything
Yeah, of course.
going on the whole time that Clinton was in power. You know, so I don't know if I'd really call it a peace period. And then there was everywhere else like Somalia and Bosnia and places like that Clinton was getting involved in. We live in a world where light bulbs connect to the internet, and recent attacks on them prove that your online security is under threat like never before. Not only your websites, but the internet-enabled devices you buy. And the biggest problem is weak passwords. That's why you need LastPass. LastPass allows you to randomly generate strong, unique passwords on the web and on your internet-enabled devices, all protected by one master password. LastPass sets up in minutes and gives you secure automatic logins throughout the web, synchronizing across all your browsers, all your computers, and even your mobile devices, at home, at work, or on the road. It even securely stores sensitive form data, including credit card numbers, backup sensitive documents, software licenses, Wi-Fi logins, and more. And with LastPass Premium, you can get these benefits on other applications, manage passwords for your entire family, and also get priority customer support. Sign up at password.bogosity.tv for a free month of LastPass Premium. Log in securely everywhere using the last password you'll ever have to remember. Go to password.bogosity.tv and get LastPass now. And now it's time to plow over this week's biggest Bogon emitter. And this week it goes to the Cockrell Hill Police Department in Texas, who recently got hit with a ransomware attack. They decided not to pay the ransom to get the data back, which is probably the right decision, since all that does is empower more ransomware, and there's no guarantee they'll get their data back anyway. And the FBI told the department the ransom amounts to the equivalent of $4,000 in Bitcoin, and the files might still end up being inaccessible even after they pay it. But the problem is, they apparently didn't have any backups for a lot of this stuff. And I mean, it is just the easiest thing. So many people are getting hit by ransomware. If they would just have good backups, it wouldn't be an issue. I mean, yeah, it would be a mild annoyance because then, I gotta take it down, I gotta restore from the backup, but I mean, you don't have to pay $4,000.
For the layman in technology that I am, could you explain what ransomware is?
So it's malware. It's like, a virus or something like that. What it does is it goes through your computer, encrypting your data files. And it does this silently so you don't even know it's there. When it's done, it pops up the screen saying that your files have been encrypted. And I mean, they did everything right with a lot of this ransomware. You are not getting it back unless you pay them. And they say if you send this much in Bitcoin to this address, and if you do that, then they'll give you the key to decrypt everything. Man, there are hacker organizations that have just made tens of millions of dollars doing this. So anyway, the laughable spin doctoring started early when Cockrell Hill Police Chief Stephen Barlog said that it wasn't the work of hackers. Ransomware is the work of hackers. But he said, quote, "No files or confidential information was breached or obtained by any outside parties," which is true, but they were destroyed, and what was destroyed is evidence in criminal cases. Barlog said that none of it was critical. Criminal defense lawyer J. Colin Beggs responded, quote, "Well, that depends on what side of the jail cell you're sitting. So while it may not be critical to the prosecution to establish guilt, it might be critical exculpatory evidence to the defense."
I feel like too many people that want to become prosecutors watch too many crime shows like NCIS, and they just
and Law and Order,
feel like they have to go on a hunch and see whoever responds emotionally.
Yeah, and the Constitution is just this annoying thing you have to get around, and defense attorneys are all horrible people.
Jack Bauer actually said that in 24. He said that he doesn't have to abide by the Constitution, even though he's a federal agent.
Well, sadly, that's the mentality of most of those guys. And he swore that oath. Why? But anyway. So in Beggs' case, he's been trying to extract video evidence for a case since last summer, well before the ransomware hit. Barlog might say it's not critical information, but our justice system doesn't allow him to make that determination. It has to be available to the defense. They can't just say, oh, well, it doesn't matter. It doesn't make any difference. Just trust us.
Yeah, that would actually be excluding evidence, which is criminal.
You can even be disbarred for that if you're the prosecutor. Now, police reports were retained in hard copy, but evidence of interest to defense attorneys wasn't, and that includes a lot of recordings of incidents, some of which were backed up on CD, but most of which weren't, and they're now lost completely. So defendants are going to have nothing at all to contradict the police reports with, even if they're completely innocent, even if this digital data would have proved it. And what this would also mean is that the police could just say that, oh, well, we lost that data to a ransomware or a hack attack or a hard drive crash. Oh, look, we don't have any backups. Sorry, but there was nothing important there. Trust us. I mean, if there aren't any consequences for this...
They wiped it with a cloth.
No, in my view, anytime evidence is lost by police or prosecutors, the case should be immediately and automatically dismissed with prejudice, and maybe that'll give them the incentive to do basic things like back up all their data. I mean, if you're not even doing the bare minimum that any IT department should be doing, then losing the data should be considered destroying evidence with all the penalties that entails.
Well, I mean, with all the resources that police take in, I'm sure not a lot of it's going to IT, and a lot of it's going to the military-grade tanks and the riot shields and other stuff like that.
Yeah, but that's why we need to incentivize them to do it. So all of that makes the Cockrell Hill Police Department this week's biggest Bogon emitter. Bogosity.tv gives you great ways to shop at Amazon. Clear your cookies and go to amazon.bogosity.tv and you won't pay a penny more for your purchase. Or go to prime.bogosity.tv for a 30-day free trial of Amazon Prime and enjoy thousands of movies and TV episodes, borrowed Kindle books, and get unlimited 2-day shipping for free. And speaking of Kindle, go to kindle.bogosity.tv for a 30-day free trial to Kindle Unlimited. Read over 1 million books and listen to thousands of audiobooks on any device. Or go to home.bogosity.tv to try Amazon Home Services. Over 1,000 different services from quality hand-picked pros, from house cleaning to equipment and furniture assembly, plumbing, electrical, painting, and other handyman services, all backed by Amazon's happiness guarantee. And as always, check the right-hand side of the podcast page for special Amazon deals. And now let's break the hash chain of this week's
Extraordinaire.
And this week it goes to Nicholas Berthaume, a former employee of the Federal Reserve who was fired and later convicted and fined $5,000 for misusing Federal Reserve computers to mine Bitcoin.
Isn't that ironic?
Okay, that's funny, but it gets funnier. So what he did was put Bitcoin mining software on servers he had access to. No one seems to know how much he mined, but even worse, he put remote access software on the servers so he can access them, which is a huge security issue. Because, I mean, if there's any security hole in there at all, then hackers could have gotten in. So here's the really hilarious part. When they confronted him, he tried to deny that he had any remote software on the server, and then promptly remoted into the servers to try and delete what he had put there. And as Naked Security put it, hashtag fail. Because that was exactly what they needed to confirm that it was him. They caught him in the act. And he pleaded guilty to 1 misdemeanor count of unlawful conversion of government property.
Government property, that's kind of an oxymoron, but...
True, but you have to love the irony of using Federal Reserve servers to mine Bitcoin, but you really have to love a stupid criminal story, and so this one has it all.
It's a lot more of a laid-back idiot extraordinaire than the past few ones we've had.
Yeah, it's good to have it be a little bit lighter. So all of that makes Nicholas Berthaume this week's
Idiot Extraordinaire.
Well, that wraps up this all the way down to the basement edition of the Bogosity podcast. Come join the discussion at forum.bogosity.tv and feel free to join in by sending a question, statement, news article, or rant in text or audio to podcast@bogosity.tv. This podcast depends on you to keep going, so please donate using the links on the website or the QR codes in the thumbnail, or become a patron at patreon.bogosity.tv and get the podcast and YouTube videos early and without ads or promos. Thank you for listening, and thanks to Blake Pettis for joining me.
Anytime.
Until next time, here's a quote from Harry Browne. Killing innocent people in retaliation for the sins of other people isn't justice, it is terrorism. The terrorists were wrong to kill Americans to satisfy their grievances against American foreign policy, and to react to them by killing innocent foreigners would also be terrorism. The Bogosity podcast is licensed under Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives 4.0 International License.
Bogosity.
Want answers to creationist claims against evolution? Would you like to know more about evolution yourself, or even engage creationists more directly, with actual peer-reviewed sources to back you up? My book, How Evolution is Scientific, is designed to show the basics of evolutionary theory and how it is so well supported using the scientific method. It's impeccably sourced, with references to the actual scientific material, and is arranged using the creationists' own criteria of what is scientific. Using their own arguments against them, see how evolution is scientific, but creationism is not, based on observations, accurate predictions, logic, and evidence. Get answers to common creationist claims, and even a primer on abiogenesis, the start of all life. It's all in my book, How Evolution is Scientific, available at Amazon and on Kindle, EPUB, and PDF as well. Get How Evolution is Scientific and never be taken in by creationists again.
The problem with trying to stop terrorism by bombing other countries is you'd have to literally kill everybody.
Yeah, pretty much.
But that's kind of impossible. And if you try, you'd probably die trying because of how many resources you'd have to expend. And then you'd be seen by the world as a tyrant. And then people would try to fight back against you.
Then you'd be finding other countries and still other countries.
Yeah, it's just an endless cycle, and you would not want to get yourself into that.